Oops. All right. Can you guys see my screen all right? You
Yeah,
guys are on mute.
it's no, it's great. Perfect on
Perfect,
my side
perfect.
here.
All right. So today I'm going to be talking about leveraging an online empire that you didn't build for faster and bigger profits. I hope you enjoy that title. Before we begin, a little background on who I am. If you guys don't know, my name is Gregory Elfrink. I am the director of marketing for Empire Flippers. We are an online business brokerage. We help people buy and sell online businesses, whether it's content sites, e-commerce stores, SaaS, or even more esoteric businesses like KDP and Merch by Amazon. So we deal with a lot of SEO people that want to sell their businesses. We're the winner 3 times now, the Inc. 5000 award for the fastest growing companies in America. And we've also won 3 of the IBBA awards, which is our International Business Broker Association. It's a association that kind of overlooks everyone in my industry, for top deal maker, top global producer, and chairman circle award. So in 2017, we sold 198 businesses, and in 2018, 279 businesses. Also, as Vincent, you might have seen Vincent say this earlier today on some of his social media, I will be winning Word Agent's 2019 Best Poet of the Year award. I'm still waiting on Vincent to create this for me, but I'm sure it's right around the corner. So, this is a question one of our customers had actually said on I believe on a podcast of ours. He said he's bought over $6 million with us, and he said, "Wouldn't it be nice if you could just buy money?" And the idea behind this kind of saying is people buy what they want all the time. If you want to get fit, you buy the gym membership. If you're hungry, you buy some food. So you can apply the same idea to cash flow by buying profitable businesses. If you want to start, if you're not making as much money as you want, you can go ahead and just buy the business that is making the money that can help you get to that goal. Now, there's a bunch of different things that go into that, and I'm going to be covering that a lot of that today. Just to set expectations correct here before we dive too deep into the meat of this presentation, I love SEO, but honestly, there are better experts here than I am on this subject. I'm sure you guys just listened to one who knows a lot about SEO. So I'm going to be talking beyond just the SERPs, where 90% of a profit explosion for an entrepreneur can happen, and waits for those SEOs that decide to think about their business in a bigger picture. What happens a lot of the times, from what I have seen, is SEOs, they get obsessed with what it takes to rank for those keywords, and that is like their laser focus, and they forget about this entire other thing that they're building, this other marketing machine and business machine. So we're going to be covering leveraging teams for the portfolio minded, which is what I call the right mindset. And then we're going to talk about why you have more leverage buying a business. So the rationale versus building one from scratch. Both of them good, by the way. I'm not saying that one is better than the other. I do think you have more leverage when it comes to buying a business, and if you're in a position where you can, that's the route I would usually recommend. And then finally, we'll wrap up with the core principles that every savvy buyer follows, which is the skill set. And if we have time, hopefully some good Q&A. So the mindset of the portfolio minded. The SEO that makes the most money in this industry isn't the one that is the best at ranking the website. Now, they can probably rank a lot of different websites, and they're probably good at SEO, but that's not the real reason why they're making so much money. There's just not enough time in the day, even with a modest portfolio of, let's say, 5 to 10 websites, to do all the SEO yourself. Like, you could, but you might not have a life afterwards. So usually the person that is making the most money in the SEO game, his skill set or her skill set is the ability to master the vision and the management of their portfolio. And when you become a person that sees the big picture, and when you become a person that really gets into the management of your team and the structure of what you're doing, your portfolio size cap becomes unlimited. If you're doing the SEO yourself, then you're really limited, maybe 5, maybe 10 sites if you're like really are productive and do your time correctly. But if you understand good management and good structure and good systems, then really the portfolio of how many profitable websites you have is pretty much unlimited, because you can always grow the system that you created. So what is being portfolio minded? If you haven't already guessed, it's a broader focus across multiple revenue sources and niches. So these are the people that have multiple different websites that they have either built or they have bought. Most of the ones we deal with, of course, are acquiring websites, but I have also met many portfolio builders that started all their sites from scratch, or a hybrid of that. And so while the core of these people is still SEO, that's the main way they're still getting traffic to their sites, they're really mitigating the risk across several other verticals that are overlapping with their online business. So some of those verticals that they are mitigating the risk on are being niche dependent. Usually their sites are in several different niches. Another thing that they're doing is revenue mitigation, because usually if they do it right, they won't, like, all the websites won't just be an Amazon associate site. There'll be a mixture of like maybe Amazon associates, ShareSell, maybe a hybrid. One site has both, and throw in display ads like AdSense and AdThrive. So they are mitigating their risk across several different verticals. It's just that their main traffic source, their core competency, which is SEO, remains the same across all of those. And as I mentioned earlier, a portfolio manager could have as little as 5 sites or more than 50. And it just really, it all depends on their systems, which is what we're going to be talking about. So I invite you right now to change your abbreviation. You might be a hardcore SEO, which is awesome. But if you want to do something where you can have a fleet of profitable cash flow, various streams of net profit coming in every single month from affiliate sites or display ads, then I would say don't be the SEO, become the CEO. And an effective CEO and manager does 3 things. They hire those that work for them. They perform weekly staff meetings and one-on-ones with their directs, and they fire those that don't work out, which is, never a fun thing to do, but that is part of their job. And that's really it. Like that's the thing that they are expected to do, and expected to do very well. And if you can do those, then, like I said earlier, your cap of your earning potential is almost unlimited with how many sites you can help manage. But back to SEO. SEO knowledge is hard won. It's almost impossible to hand off, but it's not impossible. For all you listeners out there listening to all these experts today, you're probably learning all these different knowledge bombs, but what a esoteric place to learn that, right? You can't exactly go to college and learn all this interesting stuff about a certain kind of anchor text ratio. You got to almost be in the right place at the right time to find someone that's going to give you that information. So SEO knowledge is hard won, and that makes us feel like I can never hand this stuff off to anyone. Like I hear you that I should be managing people rather than doing SEO, but like, man, I can't even control what my VAs are doing, right? So I just want to say it's not impossible. It does feel hard, but it's not impossible to hand off SEO. So a common example of this mindset that I've talked to with a lot of SEOs when we're talking about building a team and handing things off is keyword research. They often say you have to be the one that does the keyword research. A VA can't do it. And it's just too fundamental to SEO. You have to do at least the keyword research. And my argument to that is you learned how to do keyword research. If you learned how to do it, that means others can also learn. So if you're afraid that the VA can't necessarily do the keyword research, that's okay. Your team doesn't have to be just VAs. You can hire high value, well-paid professionals to help you to run your portfolio and expand your portfolio. I think that's another almost like a limiting belief that us SEOs have, like, oh, I'm not a real entrepreneur, I can only hire this VA. Like, no, you can hire a true project managers to handle these processes for you. So definitely think about that. And finally, on this change your abbreviation concept, you should systemize yourself out of the SEO. Else you're going to be forever limited. So just following up on that last point, let's say you built a media website, a very big content site that's doing about $20,000 to $30,000 net profit per month. and you have this idea that you cannot outsource that keyword research. It always has to be you. Well, what happens when you want to expand into other forms of marketing? What happens? Are you doing all the integral parts of Pinterest? Are you going to be doing all the integral parts of Facebook ads with PPC? Are you going to be doing all the integral parts of email marketing automation? And when you play this little mind game, you like bring it out to this logical conclusion that like, no, that doesn't seem right. I would need to hire people for this stuff, right? And that's exactly what you do in the SEO stuff as well. Otherwise, you're forever limited. And the cool thing with content sites is if you treat it like a real media company and you do real quality content, then there are multiple doors of marketing that are open to these sites that most people just never do because they're so focused on just the SEO side of things. So this is an example. I was talking to SEO a few days ago, or rather a few weeks ago now, about this concept of outsourcing keyword research, and he was one of those people that definitely didn't think you could do it. So I told him, like, break it down into a process. So you have your seed keywords, you log the competitor sites. So I use Ahrefs, but you can do an SEMrush as well. You reverse engineer those competitors' keywords. You put those seed and competition keywords back into Ahrefs for more keywords. You clean that list for any duplicates. You organize the keywords into topics, and then you'll create the content inventory. This is just a easy reference tool that's like, this is the the agency we use to write this content. This is the date we ordered. This is the date it went live. Here's the link, stuff like that. And then you want to create your content brief templates. And at this point, you send out the briefs to your content team. So in this example, you might have multiple people doing this process for you because a VA might not be the best person to come up with the seed keywords, the initial brainstorm list of your niche for your website. You might want to have a higher level person on your team doing the keyword, these kind of keyword research and all that good stuff. But then once you get to logging competitor sites, that's something a VA could easily do. And even reverse engineering competitor keywords, it's not that difficult for them to do. And even plopping in the seed and competition keywords back into Ahrefs isn't that difficult for them to do. Most of it is at this point is data entry. The seed keywords is what took a lot of that creativity to come up with what is possible. And obviously cleaning lists, that's just some spreadsheet work. Organizing keywords into topic ideas. Now, this is when you might want to bring that higher level person on your team back into this to organize those keywords into topics that make sense. Then you can give it back to the VA level of person of your company to create the content inventory. Your high level person should be creating those content brief templates. And then they would be the ones ultimately sending out those briefs to either your content team or a content agency like what Vincent has with Word Agents. So hopefully this weird breakdown helps you guys figure out ways to break down keyword research, something that most people I talk to have no idea how to process it out. And this is just a slide that I'm a fan of, the system for systems. So what I always say, if you want to create an SOP for something that your business does, then the person who does that task should be the one that writes that standard operating procedure. And they should break down that task into multiple repeatable steps. And then you draw out those steps visually. So we're using something like diagram.io. It's a free app on the Google Drive. It's like crazy little mind map. I found it extremely useful for me. And you can also put in who does what in that diagram. So it's much more beautiful than the diagram you saw on the previous page. I'm not an expert with the presentation mind map drawings, unfortunately. But yeah, you want this visualization, and then you can put links in that visualization to those exact SOPs that breaks down everything into those multiple repeatable steps, just like we did with the keyword research. And then you want to house these SOPs/diagrams in an easy access hub. So whatever your team uses, if your team is really into Asana, or my team uses Monday.com, but we also are big fans of just Google Drive. And you honestly don't need much else other than a Google Drive folder. It already has everything you need in there. So that's where you can house these goals, or these SOPs rather. And the goal is someone that can read this standard operating procedure and do it about as 80% as good as you. Because most likely, since you're the owner of this business, and you're the one working hard at it, you're going to be the one that is the most emotionally involved with the business. So therefore, you'll probably do the best work for it. You want to hire people that can look at this standard operating procedure that you've created, and they're about as 80% as good as you, which is probably going to annoy you at first that they're only as 80% as good as you. Why aren't they 120%? But this is actually a good thing. If you can get them to be 80%, then like, okay, you have a system now. You can give this to someone and they magically know how to do this skill now, right? So that is actually a really good thing. And again, everything should be systemized. So this idea of system for systems is something we now do at Empire Flippers. We have all sorts of different diagrams and SOPs. And honestly, it's extremely helpful, especially when you're doing a lot of different complicated things that have a lot of different moving parts. So I highly recommend implementing this idea of system for systems. So now let's look at building the team for this portfolio miner. You want to build or buy a bunch of portfolio. How does that look like if it's not just going to be you being this team? So on the left and the right, you see the PM. That stands for project manager. Could also be a content manager. If your website or portfolio grew to be much larger, so you had like 500 different websites and they're all big branded, good quality sites, then this PM might change to more like CEO of a group of your fleet, and that CEO would have project managers underneath him. But it's just a basic setup. We put 3 sites underneath each of the project managers to manage, and then you see these arrows going into the middle that says internal agency, which we'll get into in a second. But those are basically shared resources that your team uses, so across a entire fleet of your portfolio. So team structure can really be anything you want, depending on your needs. That was the simplest form I could do it. I would definitely limit your directs, and by directs I mean, say you had 8 people report you, reporting to you directly, those would be considered directs. I would limit your directs to 8 to 10. Really, 5 is a sweet spot. There's always a saying that you should only manage people for the amount of fingers on your hand. That's not necessarily true, but 8 to 10 people is still a pretty good area. Once you get above that, you should really start considering giving one of those directs some role power and take away some of your direct reports to keep that number. You will be a lot less stressed out having to do things and more, so definitely consider doing that. And prefers bigger, like I said, consider hiring CEO-like positions to oversee these project managers. And you might be wondering, like, who would want to be the CEO of like my little affiliate media sites? Well, a lot of people would actually, especially if you have a bunch of them bundled up and you have good systems for that CEO to take action. CEO, they're not the people that apply for CEO positions. They're not always like the best visionary, but they are often very good at implementing what the visionary has, which is usually the founder of the company, which is you in this case. And they could oversee those project managers for you as well. So definitely consider this. We've seen in many cases in the e-com space where a portfolio buyer will come in, he buys a business from an e-commerce store, and during transition, he hires the CEO to come in and talk with the seller, to be on those seller calls for the seller to transition the business over to both CEO. So agency that you saw on that graph, the question is always, should you do things in-house or should you outsource? So I'm for both, and it really depends on your situation, where you're at with your business, and kind of what you want. So outsourcing fulfillment agencies is honestly the best way to start. It's the quickest way to leverage systems when you really have a team yet. You know, if you go to Word agents, for example, you just buy 1,000 artists if you really scale aggressively, but like give them your briefs, and Vincent already has that figured out, right? He already has that infrastructure. Same with like reach creators with backlink outreach. You can just go to reach creators, have that system all figured out, and they have the team for you to leverage. So a lot of times you can keep your team lean by just using these fulfillment agencies that already have their own systems and incorporate them into them with your project manager and your fleet of sites. Now down the road, as your portfolio of get bigger, or perhaps you want to create a team, you can always move away from outsourcing and move more into in-house team. And in-house teams that work full-time for your company, they're almost always going to be cheaper and usually with better quality, because not that the agencies are bad quality by any means. It's just that they have clients that they're working on. So it's very difficult for them to spend, say, 40, 50 hours a week just in the mindset of your business, right? Of your niche, of your specific websites, of your specific needs. That's very difficult for them to do. So that's why in-house typically will have higher quality, because they understand your business more intimately. But it doesn't really make sense to do this again. It doesn't really make sense to have this in-house unit until your portfolio grows. So obviously, it would be dependent on how much cash flow your sites are getting. Most people that I've talked to with in-house teams, they usually have a portfolio size of at least 10 profitable websites, and usually they're making a pretty healthy profit. And they'll create what I like to call an internal agency, which is the in-house team that's shared across all of their sites. And this internal agency will even have its own website. Yeah.
Can I interrupt you for a second here? They said
for sure
your stream was getting a little choppy and the slides went away. Let's see if we can
oh no.
It was only about for 2 minutes, Greg. I didn't want to interrupt you. So, but I think it's looking better now.
Okay, good to go.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right.
Floor is yours,
do you guys know? Do you remember where I got cut off? I was in the heat of the moment.
I stopped you right when you switch slides. So if you just want to restart this in-house or outsource slide.
Sure. So what I was saying before my bad Airbnb internet rudely interrupted me, should you do things in-house or should you outsource? So outsourcing is always going to be the quickest way for you to leverage systems, even when you don't have really a team. Because if you use someone like Vincent's Word Agents, he already has the team and systems in place to handle your needs when it comes to content, right? Same with reach creators with backlinks. They already have systems. So you can outsource through these fulfillment agencies and keep your team relatively small and just incorporate them into your systems. And that's the quickest way, and is the way I recommend for you to start. But keep in mind that as your portfolio size grows, in-house will almost always be cheaper with better quality. And that's not because the fulfillment agencies are low quality by any means. It's just that when you have someone in-house, that person is working 40, 50 hours a week on your content. They're thinking about your business constantly. They're within your niche. They are living and breathing it, literally living off the income of this niche if they're managing just one website. So they'll typically have a more intimate understanding of the business needs than outsourcing to fulfillment agents as well. But it doesn't really make sense to have this in-house team until portfolio grows. In my experience, most portfolios, if it's an affiliate site portfolio, they usually wait until about 10 fairly profitable websites are in their portfolio to really start building out a more in team. Now, with e-commerce stores, typically it's less, maybe 4 or 5 e-commerce stores, because often e-commerce stores have more moving parts and it makes more sense to hire in-house there. And also consider this in-house team to be a shared resource across your project managers. So I think it's a very valuable way to consider this team like an internal agency. I would even make their own website. There's a bunch of portfolio owners I know that their company's website that talks about their media acquisitions is really just their internal agency's website. They're not really promoting that to anyone, but their teams are using that site and ordering their content or doing whatever they need using that shared resource. So we just finished the portfolio, which is the mindset. So now let's get into the rationale of why you should leverage buying a business for this kind of stuff. The very first reason, which to me is a huge reason why you should look at buying and leveraging buying a business, is the time barrier is extremely eliminated. It's reduced by a lot. You avoid the opportunity costs. In a couple of slides, I have a timeline of kind of the differences of from when you start a website versus when you buy a website. But avoiding this opportunity cost of sunk time, I think, is huge. And the other thing that you get to do is that you already know the niche is a proven profit maker. There's no, sweat like, oh man, I just spent like all this money and all this time writing this content, uploading and make it look beautiful. I really hope this makes money. When you're buying a business, you already know it makes money because that's part of the acquisition. You see the numbers, you see the P&L. You often see a video walkthrough of the affiliate dashboard, so you already know that it's making money. The other thing that you can leverage when buying a business that you just cannot do with a website that you start from scratch is really you have more ammo to play with to use more advanced strategies. If your site is just starting out and you have zero traffic or earnings or very little, then really you can't do a lot of the stuff that buyers do all the time when they acquire a website. So things like conversion rate optimization, email marketing and email list building, and even adding new revenue sources. It's extremely common when we sell an affiliate site that the only monetization on the affiliate site is, say, Amazon affiliate. They have nothing else on there. So a lot of times our buyers will come in like, oh, this is easy. They'll plop in AdSense ads or AdThrive ads, some kind of display ad network, and they'll increase their cash flow by $1,000 or $2,000, sometimes even more. We had one just recently. That person did that. He had the exact same scenario, Amazon affiliate site, and he just threw on some AdThrive, and now it's making an extra $4,000 per month. Took him about a day to do. So that's the kind of stuff you can do when you buy a business that already has traffic and earnings versus building from scratch. And just to end this on this note, it's often easier. The other reason why I recommend buying a business over building one from scratch, if you're in the right position to do so, is it's often easier to go from $5,000 per month to $10,000 per month than it is from $0 to $1,000 per month. And again, it's because you just have more ammo to play with. You can do things like conversion rate optimization. You can do things like adding new revenue sources relatively easy versus starting from scratch where you're doing all the keyword research and hoping that the niche makes money. So here's the timeline differences that I was talking about. Now, this is all very much just my assumptions and anecdotal. I don't have empirical research by any means on this, but this is what I've most commonly seen in the last 3 years, having talked to many, many SEOs with many, many different sites, both from building and from buying. So if you're building from scratch, the first 6 months, typically no revenue of any kind to speak of, large upfront time costs for keyword research, content creation, and backlink building. And you'll need some startup capital, especially if you're not writing the content yourself. That will be probably your biggest expense. And you also need some capital to do your outreach campaigns for your links or buying links if you're going that route. Now at 6 to 12 months, you might see a little bit of revenue, still nothing really to take home about. And though you're probably not even fully out of the sandbox, you're about to get out of the sandbox. So you might have moderate traffic. Most likely your keywords that are ranking aren't necessarily on the first page yet, or they're not sending you that much traffic just yet. Now, 12 to 16 months, that's usually when we start seeing those keywords move up into those more conveyed first page positions. And it's also the average time we see if the niche will truly be profitable because of that. So that moderate traffic starts coming in for the keywords, and we see, well, are we making any money at this point? And this is usually when you know is if your site is going to be a bust or not. So it only took you 12 to 16 months to figure out if the niche was proven for you. Now, 16 to 20 months, if the site will work, this is usually when you really realize that the site is going to work, or really realize this is not working out. And the reason why is because this is when all your keywords really start snowballing to that first page of Google. That traffic starts snowballing, and you could earn significant revenue, not revenue. Sorry, I was writing this presentation late last night. But this is usually when you're making that significant money. The money you will all think about when we start building these sites is usually around the 16 to that 20-month mark, when Google has enough time to give your website enough authority. Now, 25 to 36 months, this is a longer period than the other ones, but this is usually like the sweet spot. if you're looking to sell the site for a nice exit. So this is usually when you have enough data, enough profitability, enough history to really come to a broker like us and say, hey, I want to sell the site, and we can get that done for you. And buyers are very interested in websites that have at least this amount of history that shows, at least 12 months, 18 months of profitability, and shows like how that, that trend has grown over the years. Now, the time difference when you buy a business is much shorter than when you're building from scratch. So buying from the start, month one, you're already making revenue, sometimes really good revenue, depending on the business you bought. You already have moderate to significant traffic, and most of your upfront time costs, such as keyword research and creating content, that's already completed. That was already done by the person that sold the business, that was working on it. And a lot of times these guys already have a content mapping done as well of all the articles that they had planned to write when they were doing their keyword research, but they just haven't gotten around to writing them yet. So that you often are off to a head start even on creating new content just on month one. So month two, if you follow what I like to call the adding fuel method, which I'll get into in the next slide, you can often see large increases in your revenue in month two, between 15 to 30%, depending on a few different tests. Now that's anecdotal. Obviously, sometimes it's less. I've seen as small as 5% increases. I've seen as large as 60% increases because of this adding fuel method. And it's just a series of low-hanging fruit that is open to you as a buyer to do to the site once you take over. Like I said, we'll get into that in the next slide. So month three, your traffic increases because if you were doing the added fuel method, that means you added a bunch of content in month one. And because your site already has authority, Google already likes your site, it tends to rank for those keywords much, much easier than, say, a website that starts from scratch that's often in a sandbox for 6 months. So by month three, your traffic is increasing significantly. So if you were aggressive on uploading that content, which is what I personally recommend, month 4 to 12, you continue to aggressively grow the site, or you decide, you know what, I like this cash flow, I'm happy with this, I don't really need to invest more on it, and you just collect that monthly profit. You already did the vast majority of the low-hanging fruit work in month one, and it only took you to month 4 to see all the gains from that fruition. So month 12 to 15, this is really an optional thing for most people, but at this point you can sell the site again. Typically, if you follow this path, you increase the value of it by 15 to 30%. Obviously, you're probably going to get a higher multiple than what you bought the business for. But the cool thing is, if you increase the net profit even by a little bit, and you sell that 12 to 15 months into or after buying it, even if you got a similar multiple, you'll actually sell that business for more because your net profit is more. And it's very unlikely you'd get a similar multiple if everything has gone well in the last 12 to 15 months, because you now have another year of profitability underneath that business. Sure, you've only ran it for 1 year, but that doesn't erase its track record of profitability for the last few years from when the seller was building it, right? So it's very rare, unless the website tanked in terms of its revenue, that you would get a smaller multiple when you go to resell this business that you bought. So let's get into the adding fuel method here. So this is what I typically recommend. This is usually the best case for affiliate sites and content sites, but you can also do this with e-commerce sites as well. So what I would recommend is, since you have the authority to rank in Google much easier than if you're starting from scratch, I would do ordering the new content at scale and be the first thing I focus on, because ordering content, even when you have a really good agency or a really good team, still takes a lot of time because you have to organize all those keywords into proper briefs. And obviously you have to read the content that the writer gives you, or your editor has to read that. But typically, like I said earlier, the seller is going to have a content map of all the keywords that they haven't yet implemented. So you can give that a quick read through and decide whether or not those keywords make sense, or you can perform new keyword research yourself to expand the overall niche site, which is an opportunity that I don't see a lot of sellers do, but it is something I see a lot of buyers do. So a buyer will come in, they'll buy a website from us that is say primarily about blenders and different things related to blenders, and then they'll come in and write a bunch of new articles that are just about kitchen appliances, and they've expanded the site from just talking about blenders to being an overall like kitchen guru website, if you will. So that's what you do right off the bat. And while your articles are being baked by your writers, you start doing CRO. You perform conversion rate optimization. Now, I'm a big fan of the agency Convertica. Kurt Phillips does this service, but there's a bunch of different agencies out there that can do this for you, or you can do it yourself. And this is really powerful. I think like we did CRO on just our valuation tool, which is one of our lead magnets. I forget the exact number, but our leads about doubled that we're getting on that valuation tool simply by changing the design of it and making it into a like more of a gamified lead gen form. There wasn't any extra traffic going to that site. We just converted it way more. And that's the name of the game with CRO. Since you already have moderate to significant traffic, if you can make a few tweaks, a few design tweaks, placement tweaks of where you put your affiliate offers or your display ad blocks, then you could sometimes increase your net profit by a huge margin. And the cool thing with CRO, this is especially true if you hire an agency like Convertica to do this for you, is it really doesn't take any time for the most part. So you do the design tweaks. Maybe that takes a day, maybe 2 days to do, and you implement it and you set up your testing, and then you're doing nothing for about a week to 2 weeks, however long it takes to get statistical significance. And once you you usually can have a clear winner by the end of that 2-week period, and you just roll out the winning tweaks, and you're done. It's a very, very painless process, especially if you use an agency. So I recommend that to everyone that buys the site, and that's for e-commerce, for SaaS, for any site. It doesn't just have to be content sites on this. The other thing, and this is more of just a content site thing, is like I said earlier, if you're buying an affiliate site, the vast majority of affiliates are so narrow focused on just that monetization, just Amazon associates, that they won't have any other revenue stream. So that means they often have a lot of high quality, high trafficked informational pieces of content that really aren't monetized in any meaningful way. So you can often just add display ads like AdSense, or if you're getting enough traffic, you can go into places like AdThrive and Mediavine that often have higher RPMs than say AdSense, and monetize that informational content. Some of these companies, I believe AdThrive does this, they'll help you optimize your display ad blocks. There's also companies like Ezoic and Monetize More that they work with AdSense specifically to optimize the blocks of your display ads to make sure that they convert the best. So this is often a very easy win. Like I mentioned just a few days ago, one of my friends, he had an Amazon affiliate site. He added AdThrive. It took him about, I think, 2 or 3 days, and it increased that monthly cash flow by around $4,000 per month, which is crazy. So it's definitely something I recommend. The next thing is to create an email follow-up and start collecting an email list. I'd say 99% of SEO entrepreneurs I meet are focused on building an email list. And again, this is thinking about the bigger picture of things outside of just ranking in Google. So you should do this. You should create this email, even if you don't send out any emails just yet. You should have the option to do so. And emails can do all sorts of interesting things for you. You know, you can send out affiliate offers. You can bring people back to your content. If you ever expand, like say you bought a content site and you expanded by ordering your own physical products, you can launch that to that list. So there's all sorts of cool things you can do with a list. And if you've been around in the online marketing world, you know they always say the money is in the list. They're talking about the email list, and we all know this to be true. But it's kind of like knowing, like, well, going to the gym is good for you. Yeah, I know that, but I'm not going to do that. So a lot of people, they skip this step. I highly recommend to implement it. Is often an opportunity that you can use, and often an opportunity you can make money with very quickly with your acquisition, because again, you already have traffic, you already have offers that are proven to work. So definitely consider that. Another thing that is a less common thing that you can do with your acquisition is you can install your Facebook ad pixel to the site. Now, You might use this later for running ads, say in that scenario where you launch your own product, maybe a physical product, maybe an info course in your niche, something along those lines. But another thing you can do here, even if you don't run Facebook ads, is you can rent out that pixel to another company. So say that Blender website, you reached out to people like BlendTech, say, hey, here's my traffic. I have this pixel. Would you guys be interested in renting it? A lot of times they'll be, absolutely, that sounds great. How much do we pay? And I've seen people pay as high as $2,000 a month for renting someone's pixel. So that is an interesting little monetization strategy for that. So your new content will rank in weeks rather than months with this adding fuel method, because again, of the authority that you already have. And the other items on the list are just common low-hanging fruit that you can apply right now and often get that 10 to 30% lift in revenue for very little time and monetary costs. Sorry, guys, my HubSpot is going nuts there. It's just trying to communicate with me that people are responding to me. So this is the last part, the skill. So the core principles of every savvy buyer. What does that look like? Oh man, I gotta mute this. Sorry, guys. Here we go. So what are the core principles of every savvy buyer? So buyers, they're wildly different from each other. I'd say there's less in common with buyers than there are with sellers. Typically, sellers have very similar mindset and very similar goals. That is not the case with buyers. They're all over the place, from an SEO watching this webinar right now to a person working a 9 to 5 in some cubicle that wants to buy a cash stream and go spend more time with their family and quit their job or go travel the world, to institutional investors that they test the waters by buying $3 million worth of businesses over like a 2-month period. So buyers really range the gamut on who they are and what their goals are. But there are some core principles that all the best buyers share in common, despite their very wildly different backgrounds. So the first one is creating a criteria. We'll break down each of these, but it's creating a criteria, deploying a due diligence framework, sourcing for that deal flow, understanding negotiation, and finally leverage creative deal structuring. So let's get into the first one. The first one is the creating criteria. And the first rule of acquisition is every acquisition furthers your personal and your business goals. So your criteria is, what do you actually want to accomplish? Why are you acquiring this business? Write out your goals. What do you want to do? And also, what is your desired monetization and traffic channel? I'm assuming for most people here, their desired traffic channel is SEO, but that doesn't mean affiliate sites is your desired monetization. Maybe you absolutely love e-commerce or absolutely love SaaS. So maybe your criteria for acquisition is a website that is in that space that has the SEO opportunity, right? And then finally, how many hours do you want to work? Some of these businesses take only a few hours a week to manage. Some of these businesses take 40 to 50 hours a week to manage. So ask yourself, what do you want to do? Or like, what would help you the most with your personal and your business goals? What is your realistic budget to buy one of these kind of businesses? And have you set aside working capital for after you buy the business? Because the last thing you want is to buy an e-commerce store for $800,000 and then realize, oh, I don't have any working capital to buy inventory with. You don't want that to happen. So you want to make sure you have a realistic budget to work with. And you also want to make sure you're buying a business that resonates with a realistic skill set of yours. So going back to the SaaS argument, if you want to buy a SaaS business, but you have no idea how to run a developing team, and you have no idea about anything with coding, and you came to us and you told us that, we would say, well, while we don't want to tell you don't buy a SaaS business, as your broker, we would recommend you don't do it just yet. Maybe get your feet wet in the online marketing world with something a little bit more hands-off. So make sure you approach these acquisitions with a realistic skill set. And finally, for creating your criteria, you should ask yourself, how many deals do you want to acquire? How many deals do you need to acquire to hit the goals that you've written out? So the second part is deploying a due diligence framework. So you want to create your personal due diligence framework based off your criteria that you just created. And the number one priority that this framework does for you is it helps you disqualify a potential acquisition deal as quickly as possible to let you move to the next deal that might fit your criteria better. So the due diligence framework, since like I said earlier, buyers are wildly different people with wildly different goals. The thing that is common about this framework is that it is always a series of checklists that begins with the easiest checks first, and then ends with the hardest checks. So the easiest checks should help you disqualify a deal. Hopefully, in 5 minutes of looking at the deal, just looking at the basics of the deal, you can say, nope, that one isn't for me. Great, here's the next deal, and hopefully you start getting down that checklist. And as you keep getting down, you go more and more into in depth on that business. So some things that buyers look for or check first are things like access to their analytics, access to their Clicky account, they're using Clicky, access to a P&L. This is especially common in e-commerce, less common in content sites. Usually with content sites, it's more like a video walkthrough of an affiliate dashboard to show proof of earnings, something along those lines. But yeah, it's just a series of checklists, both surface and deep, to look at that business. And you should never go into depth with the seller until it meets at least a few of your checks on this framework. So if the business is just not meeting anything, or it only meets like one or two of maybe a 15-point checklist of yours, then it's probably not worth it for you to go deeper with that seller. It's probably going to serve you better just to go to the next deal where there's less red warning lights on that business, and there's more green lights on that business that you want to continue to go down. So your job at this point is not only to find a business that matches your criteria, but to also make sure that the business is performing as it is advertised. And that's part of this due diligence framework. So you want to make sure that, yes, the traffic is real, the profit that this guy is saying he's earning is real, everything looks above the board. And your due diligence should also include not just things to check like on analytics, but certain things to check within the analytics, or certain things to check within the P&L that you have found over time of doing this acquisition searching that people make mistakes on or people try to hide about. So your due diligence framework should definitely look at capturing to the best of your ability to make sure that the seller is telling the truth about everything. And one warning on these acquisition stuff, there is a lot of misinformation and shady people out here trying to sell, quote unquote businesses. And you got to be careful. If your acquisition target is below the $50,000 mark, you need to be especially careful if you go the private route with buying a website, because typically it is most of the scams that are in our space will happen at the sub $50,000 level, because typically those numbers are just easier to inflate and make look real. So it's easier for them to convince you that, hey, the site is really making money. You buy this $50,000 site and it's making $500, and you find most of their commissions or coming in from extended family buying something over and over again, or some other weird way to game the affiliate system. Once you get over the $50,000 range, though, and especially once you get over the $100,000 range, that becomes extremely less common. If this is your initial budget of $50K to buy a business, and that's all you can do, I highly recommend you go with a broker if it's your first time buying a business, rather than the private route, because most reputable brokers will be able to catch these people before they even get onto their marketplace. So speaking of brokers, the next part of every savvy buyer's core principles is how they source their deal flow. So there's really two ways to source deal flow in our space. There's private sourcing, and private sourcing is where there's no broker involved, no marketplace involved. In fact, the person that might sell the business had no idea they might sell the business until you reach out to them. So a lot of cold email outreach, maybe even cold calling these people, depending on the business and the contact information that's available. You are going out there and hustling yourself for these deals. You're sourcing them yourself. One thing to know with private sourcing is that it can be riskier, like I mentioned earlier with the scams. It can be riskier in other options too, such as just wasting your time. But despite it being riskier, you will you will usually be able to find more, or more likely to find an undervalued deal when you're doing private sourcing than if you go through a broker, because a lot of times sellers don't exactly know what they have or what it's worth, or maybe they are just wanting to sell for some life reason and they don't really care as much than someone who uses a broker that is, more in the mindset like, hey, I want to make the most as I possibly can from this business, right? So you can often get better deals when you go private sourcing. Not always, but it's more likely to happen. One thing that if you go with the private sourcing route, looking for this ever wonderful undervalued deal that's out there, is you might waste a lot more time doing private sourcing than using a broker. And this is because you're going to face a lot more rejections, a lot more people who own these sites that are non-committed. They say like, yeah, give me an offer. Almost every entrepreneur that gets an email like, hey, I want to buy your business was like, yeah, give me an offer. I'm curious. So you spend all this time writing up this offer, maybe even talk to them on the phone, and then they just say, it sounds interesting, but I'm not interested at the moment. Sorry. So you're going to be dealing with not these non-committal sellers. That's just the fact of life, unfortunately, with private sourcing a lot of the time. So the second option of deal flow is using a broker. So a broker is someone like us at Empire Flippers, where we have a marketplace where we have dozens of businesses for sale at any given time. And this saves a large amount of time of finding those committed sellers, because already, like, well, this guy went to a broker to sell the business. They're probably pretty committed to selling the business, right? And that's usually the case. So that's a huge time cost that is avoided when you use a broker. And also, it's important to remember that while the broker is trying to get the most amount of money for the deal, for the business, that doesn't mean they're in it to make the buyer lose. Good brokers don't look at this business as a zero-sum game where one side has to win for another one to lose. For example, at Empire Flippers, we believe in a win-win-win. So we want the seller to win, where they feel amazing with the money that they got for the deal. And we want the buyer to win, that they feel amazing that they were able to invest in the deal. And of course, we want to win as the broker with a successful transaction, because we want both the seller and the buyer to come back and use this again. Internet entrepreneurs are very tech savvy, and they often have many different businesses. So we would love for them to come use our service again. So we help people negotiate from both sides that makes the most sense for both sides. So that's something that we do that you would not get in a private sourcing with your deal flow. And also, it's just less risky, as reputable brokers will typically vet the business, like I mentioned earlier. So if you're in that underneath the $50,000 price range, using a broker is often a great way to eliminate the vast majority of the risks of it possibly being a scammy website or not a real website. So no, I use the word vetting when I said that, not due diligence. So there's sometimes a confusion with my team. We have an entire department dedicated to vetting a business, but that is not due diligence. Vetting is just making sure that the seller is being honest about who he is, that he's not lying about who he is, that is making the money that he says it's making, and it is making or it's getting the amount of traffic that he says it's getting. So that's all that vetting is, for the most part, just making sure everything is above the board. Due diligence obviously can be very, very different based off what your criteria is. Someone might in their due diligence, they would have, like, I'm specifically looking for sites that have Google penalties because I know how to fix them, versus another broker or another buyer, their due diligence is 0 Google penalties because I have no idea how to fix them. So vetting and due diligence can be very different from each other. The other thing that a broker does when you're sourcing this deal flow is, as a deal is getting close to actually being done, say it's in migration, you've sent in the money with us, we hold on to the money until everything is cleared by the buyer. And so what the broker does is we help you make sure that you and the seller both do what was promised. What did you guys agree to do? Is that seller giving you the correct amount of support and training like he promised on that call? Is the business making the revenue and the traffic that the seller promised on that call? So we make sure that both sides are doing what they said that they're going to do. And that's a very important thing. It's a big reason why a lot of people use us in the first place. So the next part for a buyer is understanding the actual negotiations. Now, This honestly could be an entire presentation in itself, and probably a few of these topics could be the entire presentation in itself. So I'm going to be just go over the very high level basics of negotiations. The first rule of negotiating a better price or a better deal for a business is understanding that negotiation is all about being flexible. It is a give and take, like a dance, if you will. If you want to pay less than list price for a business, then you might need to offer more money up front. Now, if you want to pay less in upfront and you want to have a long earnout of some kind, then you will likely need to pay more in the long run. Because you also have to think what is a good deal for the seller, right? I'm sure there was someone that just came on to here onto this webinar series, and they talked about copywriting, right? Think about, how does your customer feel? How can you write that content to appeal to that customer, to satisfy their emotional needs, to alleviate their pain, or to give them some sort of pleasure in their life by buying your service, right? That's something that copywriters think about all the time. And that's something, honestly, us as entrepreneurs think about all the time too, is like, how can we better serve our customers? We take that hat off and we forget to wear it when it comes to buying a business or selling the business that we have. We forget that, okay, this potential seller is now my customer. What does my copywriting hat tell me about him? How can I alleviate this customer's anxiety? Because remember, selling a business, even if you're using a broker, even if everything is going perfectly well, is still a stressful process. And for a seller is often one of the only, if not the only deal that they have sold or ever will have sold, because they spent years building it up, right? So keep that in mind. How can you put that seller at ease? And if you make that seller like you, then even if your deal the offer you give is less than, say, another offer, that seller is more likely to go with you a lot of the times, just because of that relationship, because of how at ease you made that seller feel. You got rid of the anxiety and the stress, and so he really believes in you as the new operator and is willing to give you a better deal, despite that person having a better offer on the table. Ends up giving you the deal, and that's something that is more common than you think in this business. One final thing on negotiations is, usually when people think of negotiations, they're always thinking of just about price, but negotiations doesn't just have to be about price. There's things you can talk about: support. Maybe you have some of their customer service migrate over with you if they're not already coming over with you for a short transition period till you hire your own customer service. Training on special things. Maybe they have a special link building or content brief you're more curious to learn deeper stuff on. Or if you're doing the portfolio minded stuff that I was talking about earlier, where you have a CEO, this is part where you can negotiate with that seller, like, hey, look, I'm going to bring a CEO on or a project manager on to manage this media site that I'm buying from you. I would really like it if all the training you give to me, that we had him come on to that call too, and that you really support him in learning to take over this business. And honestly, most sellers, they're very happy to get that money, and they're usually more than open to giving you as much support as you need, within reason, of course. If you're asking for like 12, 20-hour calls on every day, they're probably not going to be super thrilled. So keep that in mind too. But the vast majority of the time, sellers want to see you succeed as the new owner of their business. And so they're usually pretty open to what they're willing to give you as far as support and training. So never forget that part, as there's a lot of cool things you can get out of that, such as their SOPs, their content map, all sorts of different things that they had built up. So the final part of a savvy buyer's core principles is leveraging what I call creative deal structuring. So understanding deal structuring is really the buyer's secret weapon. And in our industry in particular, it's very difficult to get traditional financing. So if you go to, say, a Wells Fargo and say, hey, I want to buy this $300,000 Amazon affiliate site, give me a business loan, Wells Fargo would typically look at you and say, what are you talking about? No, get out of this office. You're crazy. Because they don't understand our businesses very well. So financing is very limited in the traditional sense in our space. And so that leads to all sorts of interesting creative deal structuring. Earnout is typically, say you had that $300,000 business. You put down $260,000 to buy the business, and with the last 40,000 paid out over a series of a few months. And sellers will often go for this. And what's great about it, as a buyer, you should almost always be looking to do an earnout as a buyer, because very rarely will sellers ever charge you any kind of interest. And so you're basically effectively getting a 0% interest loan when you buy this business. And you could tie should be systemized that, say, that $40,000 you're going to pay over 6 months to various other conditions that help you mitigate the risk of the deal. So I don't have enough time to go over all of them. You can check out the definitive guide to deal structuring below on that link, or you just type in deal structuring. I'm pretty sure we rank on the first page for that because it's a weird keyword. But yeah, there's things like milestones, so tying things to revenue or net profit, or balloon payments, and there's also seller retained equity. So these are just a few ideas for milestones in particular. Say you're going to pay, say you're earning about 10 grand a month, and the agreement was that you pay 4 grand as long as the revenue hits 8 grand per month every month. So as long as you at least hit 8 grand, you're going to pay that 4 grand to the seller, and you tied that to revenue. Now, sellers want you to tie that to revenue because revenue is more stable than net profit. But as a buyer, you should seek to tie it to net profit when possible. So let's say same scenario is making 10K per month. You have to make let's say it was 10K net profit per month this time. So revenue, you have to make at least 8K net profit per month to pay out that 4 grand of the milestone to the seller. And in this case, you do all the low-hanging fruit that I just discussed. And so your net profit for that business actually fell to, like, say, 3 grand for that first month. And you wouldn't have to pay that 4 grand for that first month because you and the seller have already agreed that if it dips below a certain net profit, then you'll use that money to get that business back up in terms of that net profit. It's also helpful if there's like a Google algorithm update that like hits your site and tanks it. So one way you can mitigate some of the risk while you're recovering. Again, though, most sellers are not going to go for this net profit milestone because they're afraid of you being one of those buyers that are like, oh, I'm just keep reinvesting 6 grand every month into web redesign, and they're like, well, baby, man. So a lot of times they're not going to be interested in that profit, but that is one way to mitigate your risk as a buyer. And really, deal structuring in general is a way to mitigate your risk when it comes to acquiring these businesses, and it's just a really good practice to learn how to do it. So this is a advanced buyer strategy, something that I was thinking about not talking about, but I decided to talk about it. And that's the concept of raising capital. So again, like I mentioned, financing is notoriously difficult in the online space, at least at the sub $10 million range. Once you get above the $10 million range, that's when a lot more traditional financing opens up. But if you're looking at buying an $800,000 site, it's going to be, for the most part, difficult to finance that. But that doesn't mean there isn't money out there. There's plenty of money that exists out there that want the kind of return on investment that digital assets can give them. Investors want that ROI, but the problem is they just have zero knowledge in the space. So, doctors and surgeons that want to put their money somewhere, commercial real estate investors, they're extremely smart when it comes to commercial real estate investing, and that's very complicated. And they have money. I mean, they're buying $1 million properties all the time. They just have zero knowledge. So you can be the person that comes in with the knowledge that helps them bridge that gap and create some sort of club deal or partner deal with these investors to help you raise money to buy these kind of digital assets. So some places to raise money, these are all the common shops that I see people go to do this. Obviously, friends and family, I always say be careful on that one. I would honestly do that one last, but that's my own personal thing. Also, local real estate investor clubs. Almost every city in America, at least, has some kind of real estate investor club, and usually there's multiple of them. And these are people who are proactively meeting once a week or once a month to discuss how can they make their money make more money, right? So this is like a pretty targeted area for you to go in there and pitch about buying assets and building out a portfolio. And by the way, if you're building out a system like I talked about earlier in the portfolio minded, where you have the entire structure of your team, if you can show that to an investor rather than just saying like, hey, I'm good at SEO, you should give me 100 grand to buy a business, like that investor is going to be much more interested in working with you, right? Like, oh, okay, this guy's really put in some thought here. It looks like he has had some success. He understands like how things are structured. So yeah, okay, it makes them much more likely to partner with you on things like this. Including with real estate investor clubs, there's also local entrepreneur investor clubs, or really just professional investor clubs. So this is a weird fun fact that which I'm full of weird fun facts, but the original Evil Dead movie, which is now a cult classic that the vast majority of people know about, was originally bankrolled by a group of dentists that the actors reached out to that thought a campy horror movie sounded like a great financial investment. So, luckily, they were right in this case.
You are ridiculous for that. That was just ridiculous. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I was watching behind the scenes on that. Just thought that was hilarious. But yeah, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a real estate people. It doesn't even necessarily have to be your traditional financial investment kind of people. It could be your dentist, according to Evil Dead. Another thing you could do to raise capital for online businesses is hosting educational events, weekly webinars, both online or offline. And another thing you can do is become what is known as a buyer broker. So a buyer broker, they're a bit different than what we do. They represent the buyer, they look for the deal, and typically they'll either get paid out in a mixture or one or the other of a commission fee, whatever the business was worth, or they will get paid in a small portion of equity for every deal. So we have a few buyer brokers on our on Empire Flippers that they'll come and buy these businesses on behalf of their client. And what the deal is with their client is that broker is a master deal maker. They understand negotiations like nobody's business, so they can often get good deals, and they get a very small portion of equity in every deal they get to one of their clients. Typically, not more than 5%, depending. I would be very surprised if you can get more than 5% on something like this, but that is one way to get money. And if you have the skill set of both deal making and SEO, you can probably negotiate with that client for a bigger equity stake if you help run the operation side of things. There's also more traditional financing starting to open up, but it's very, very, very small still for our space. One of them is SBA loans, so small business administration loans. Those are becoming much more common, but it is still difficult to do, especially if you're buying a e-commerce store from a solo entrepreneur. They're not usually the best on doing taxes, and e-commerce is one of the hardest things to do taxes on. So it's often difficult to get the SBA loan done. But that is an option now that is becoming more and more available and is very attractive. I forget how much you can get upfront, but it's a large percentage of the sales price, and the rates are usually very favorable. And that goes for HELOCs as well. So if you own your equity in, say, your own personal property, you could take out a home equity line of credit that works kind of like a credit card, say, like $100,000 of credit, and you can use it or not use it. It doesn't really matter. And you only pay the interest on the stuff that you use from that HELOC. It's like a giant revolving credit card with a much more attractive interest rate. But people use that to buy businesses all the time too. Now, I wouldn't recommend that if you are just starting out and you're just like dipping your toes in the water. I wouldn't recommend either of those options. I wouldn't even recommend really raising money if you're just starting out. Try something, buy something simple first. Get your confidence going first. Don't put any kind of risk on a rainy day fund or emergency fund. You should never buy a business using those kind of funds. You should always come from a place of confidence and power. But I'm sure there's a lot of advanced people on this webinar from all these different experts. So I wanted to talk about this because it's something I don't see a lot of buyers do. And there's a really big opportunity if you want to turbocharge your ability to acquire online businesses. So do you want an empire? When you approach acquisitions with the right mindset, the right rationale, the right skill implementation, you're looking at a way to supercharge your online profits in a big, big way. There's no investment that exists today that gives you so much control over the investment and such a huge ROI potential. The only question is, does building an empire through acquisition make sense for you? that answer might be no. It might like this whole presentation was stupid, Greg. It doesn't make sense for me at all. Like that's okay. It's not one. It's it's not a black and white argument here. It really depends on what your goals are, what you're comfortable with, and what you want to achieve. So with that said, I'm open to Q&A if we still have time. No idea if I went long or not. If you guys want to contact me, you can shoot me an email, greg@empireflippers.com, or you can read my bad poetry by adding me on Facebook. So
Great job, man. I don't think people have realized yet just how much information you shared with them. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure.
Finished with a bit that appeals to the degenerates like myself, but maybe not to everyone. I'm sure some people will be displeased with some of the fundraising options. But I mean, to be fair, you did say you don't recommend them all. It was a very Donald Trump. Some people are doing these things. I don't do it myself.
Do you guys have a lot of buyers that purchase on credit?
With like a credit card?
No, just or a purchase on raised funds.
Yeah, so it's becoming more and more common actually. For example, we just had an institutional investor raising a bunch of money from investors with kind of like a dividend kind of style where they pay out their investors in dividends, and they just bought about $3 million worth of FBA businesses from us. So if you asked me a question in 2017, I would have been like, yeah, there's like one person there, but there's a bunch of people doing it, and it's becoming much more common.
Cool, that's interesting.
Jared's saying he can't see my video, but I can see myself, and it looks like
just turn your video off and on. That should fix it, I would think.
Let me try it again.
Or blowing it.
Hopefully my video wasn't too bad. I have a Dell XPS, and the camera angle is terrible. It's like right above my keyboard.
Yeah, there you are.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
Cool. And then Greg disappeared.
Now we get this bad angle.
Now Greg's coming back. All right, buddy. So we did have a couple questions.
Greg about his degen fundraising, but other than that,
the very first question for you: Empire Flippers or Flippa? Which one do you pick, Greg?
Well, with my professional opinion, I pick Empire Flippers, but I'm obviously biased for but Flippa is definitely a good route to go as well. There's nothing wrong with Flippa. I do think you have to do more careful due diligence with Flippa than you would with us. Again, especially at that sub 50K level. But a lot of Flippa's business model has changed recently to where they have a lot of one-man brokers putting their listings on Flippa. So that's become less of a problem than it used to be.
Yeah. And I would say as a seller, the main detractor from Flippa would be you're revealing your site up front to a whole bunch of people. I don't know why we really want to do that at all. And
the thing I think about Flippa is it's the place you put your donkeys that you want to get rid of, that you've given up on. So if you're buying on Flippa, I feel like you're buying someone's donkey that they want to get rid of. Like no one selling a real site that's worth real money's on Flippa. So I'm always like, what's wrong with this site? And then you see the conversation backwards and forwards with sellers in the comments and the criticisms that get posted. Some of them you soon see what's wrong with the site. It's like, this isn't.
The other issue with Flippa too is like, I think they charge. I'm sorry. What was that?
Just muting Garrett quickly.
Oh yeah, there you go.
The other issue with Flippa is they charge like a 15% commission fee, which is the same that we charge as a full broker for businesses underneath $1 million, which I don't know how people do that. I mean, we have an entire vetting team, migration team, sales team.
Donkeys that you wouldn't take on as a site. So
true enough, the donkeys.
But beyond the joke question, we did have a few real questions for you here. Andrew wanted to know, how do you avoid scams, and are there any methods to avoid that pitfall?
Yeah, so the easiest method is to just go with a reputable broker. Most of the time, they're going to weed out most of that. the things you want to look for in terms of like if you're doing a private deal is you want to compare that revenue with their analytics. So if you're seeing like all this revenue, but the traffic seems really off, like seems very low compared to the revenue, or like all the traffic seem to come on a single day, and you match that with the affiliate dashboard, and you can often see like when products were ordered or when you made money, and that looks weird. Like, okay, maybe you need to do a deeper dive. And one of the easiest things to do is just a video walkthrough, because most scammers, they actually just Photoshop the images, which is very easy to dispel if you can do a video walkthrough of their dashboard.
Very cool.
Well, I guess the other thing as well is watch Joe Sinkwitz's video, because he has his black hat slides where he walks you through some things what you might do to make one site look more real. You can reverse
it's a good investigative segment.
I mean, Joe, as usual, delivered his usual edge of the line content with a lot of good stuff. So, but obviously, from a buyer's perspective and a purchaser of influencer marketing placements, you should be looking out for finding sites that are the exact opposite of the ones he describes in making.
There you go.
So, one nice thing about always learning about Black Hat, you can, when you go to buy an online business, just having the knowledge of Black Hat at the beginning makes you so much better at due diligence.
Yeah, I wish I had more knowledge. It would be hard to have as much knowledge as Joe, though, someone who's been in the game so long. But yeah, a little bit more knowledge would be nice when it comes to what people are up to. What's the so tell me, like there's a business model I've seen out in the wild, like people finding groups of investors, buying sites for them, then they take a fee at both ends, but they're usually buying brokers, so then there's the broker fee that they're paying as well. And there's obviously a lot of money sloshing around in this at the minute. I mean, how do you see the market maturing and settling down? Are we entering that phase now? Is that phase still 10 years away? What's the state of play with, the money versus market maturity kind of dynamic at the minute?
Yeah, so I think we're still very young. In the last 2 years, we've seen more, I guess, professionalized buyers come into our industry, like people you were just describing raising money. But it's easy to forget, especially if you work for EF like I do. It's easy to forget that buying and selling online business is an extremely niche thing that most people don't really know anything about yet. People in our space are starting to know more about it. But the average investor, the average person goes to a business broker, they never have even heard of the concept. So I think we're still in young days. I think there will be more institutional investors come into play in 2019 and in 2020. I think we'll see bigger businesses with better track records come to sell, both in our marketplace and privately. But I still think we're definitely years away before we reach the maturation point where traditional financing opens up to the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a good point, because if financing opens up, it's going to push prices up to more. Because while you were presenting, we were chatting just in the organizers chat, and the multiples are still. When you were talking about the buyouts, my thinking was, if I was selling, the multiples at the minute are so low because of the risk, like 3 times earnings, 4 times, stuff like that. They're so low because of the risk the buyer's taking. So if you're the seller, you're already, losing a premium because of the risk. So accepting a buyout to me would be insane. I would never offer or accept. So. But obviously, financing will push multiples up because there's clearly money.
And that would also basically get rid of earnouts in a lot of scenarios. Because remember, earnouts are a scenario that's brought about by just the need, because there's no other real solution out there other than maybe SBA loans. When financing comes into place, the ability for a buyer to do an earnout with a seller becomes not as big of an opportunity, because the seller's like, no, screw yourself, go get a loan, pay me the full price, right? So that will probably start happening, and that will also increase the overall multiples, because now there's better buying option out there.
I suppose I would accept a buyout if I got to charge 29% interest equivalent on the shortfall.
Get this payday loan content sec.
Yeah, it's all payday loan at payday loan rates.
It's a fair rate. It's a fair rate for stealing my money. You should have had it when you wanted to buy my site.
But yeah, a lot of sellers are.
My take on it is, if say there's a year buyout, you're only getting 3 times multiples. If you've got the risk for the extra year, you may as well have held the site for an extra year and had 100% of that money.
Yeah. To be fair, though, a year earnout is pretty long. Typically, the earnouts are more between 3 to 6 months. And usually they are giving like 80 to even 90% of upfront cash to the business. So while the seller is taking a risk on earnout, typically it's not as big of a risk as you might think. Since I've been with EF, I've only seen an earnout not paid about 2 times, I think, maybe 3 times. And one of them was issue with the seller for sure. He deserved to get that payout. So only 2 times where something actually fell through on an earnout. So it is, you're definitely right. You are taking a risk as a seller, but I think it would be unwise to sell a 6-figure or multiple 7-figure business where you just flat out refuse an earnout.
When if a buyer paying an earnout, let's say for 3 months they're paying an earnout, is the seller, like, let's say the buyer pays 9% up front, and then that last 10% is split over 3 months.
Mm.
And the buyer's, paying whatever it is each month for 3 months. Is the seller still collecting, like, month 1 during that 3-month buyback? Is the seller still collecting 3 1/3% of their equity?
So the seller in this case still has equity in the company?
Right. So let's say, like, the buyer put up 90%.
Yeah.
Is the seller keeping 10% of that equity for the 3 months?
No. So they don't, in a just pure earnout deal, they don't have any equity in the company. So it's just an earnout. Now,
could it be the price, though, based on the fact that, like, if someone offered you a straight cash deal, your price would be lower that you'd be prepared to sell for than an earnout. So they're effectively paying the equivalent of you keeping a share, because you're not going to sell for cheap, are you? So
now you could do an earnout where you really do have seller retain equity, and that's something we see not typically in the sub 200K space. That's usually something more in the 7-figure deals, and usually more software related or e-com related. But yeah, so you can do an earnout with seller retain equity, but most earnouts are not seller retain equity.
Jared's just asking about the mechanics of it. So when there is a buyout, how's it administered? And what involvement does the broker have? How's it all kind of, because you spoke about, if the profit drops, who audits the fact the profits dropped? How's it administered? Who's in charge of all of that? Like, you're talking about sort of sub 200 deals and stuff, sometimes having earnouts. I mean, you can't pay professional fees on someone to check the numbers.
Yeah, for sure.
Earnout. I mean, how does it get handled?
Yeah, so what we do, I can't say how other brokers do it, because I honestly don't exactly know how they do it. But what we do is, when someone buys a business from us, they wire us the money. We hold on to that money before paying it out to the seller. And if it's like a content site, we will usually hold the domain as well. And we transfer everything over in terms of hosting and files and affiliate links, all that kind of stuff, to that buyer. And then there's a 2-week revenue verification period where we just hold the money and hold the domain. And the buyer will show us the analytics. He'll usually give us the same guest access privileges that the seller gave us. And he'll show us, like, yes, it's hitting the traffic quota that the seller says it was going to hit. Yes, it's hitting the earnings that the seller says it's going to hit. And typically we won't reverse a deal unless it's like a grossly overstated amount, like, less than 50% it's coming in versus what the seller had promised. In that case, we will reverse the deal, but it's not something that happens very often.
So are you guys like a kind of registered escrow company as well then? So you've got like client money accounts separately and that kind of thing?
Yeah, we so escrow is a good service. Like, I don't want to beat them up, but the problem with escrow is, like, they don't know about online business super well. So they like the idea of them making a mistake could happen, right? Where they're like, "Oh, you got the domain. Here's the payout." That's the agreement. Like, well, there's like this whole support agreement, this back or the deal structure. So sometimes escrow isn't the best solution, so we just do it ourselves.
Okay, that's interesting. You've given me a lot to think about with this this presentation.
You're welcome.
We've got some questions from the audience, so I'll stop asking you all. I'll come back. Jared's just asking, so say month 6, the last bit of the pay should be coming. You've got that money in advance. Well, I guess it's a buyout, so the buyer has money. Do you face them for it then, or?
Yeah, so it depends on the deal. So sometimes the seller will accept an earnout, but they'll make the buyer still send us the full amount. That's rare, but it does happen. Typically, the reason why a buyer wants the earnout is 1, the 0% interest loan, but 2, it gives them more working capital to work on the website, to grow it aggressively with the CRO and all this other low-hanging fruit. And that's like the real reason, other than the 0% interest loan, why they want it.
Yeah, so it's like 10%
yeah,
reinvestment in the site.
Exactly. It's just like buying a real estate property that you want to refurbish, right? As a fixer-upper, you want to put that low down payment, put in the refurbishing, get the value, and exit. And that's an entire business model in our space with people that will buy a website and 6 to 10 months later flip it for a much higher rate. Since I came on board, I've seen the same site sell 4 times, I think, now on our marketplace.
It's obviously a grower. Like, you should tip someone off to keep it and sell it for a little bit more, and then get some more commission. It's like, no, this one keeps getting worth more. You should probably. I mean, that's what we would do. I mean, at the moment, I'm in England, so houses are a bit expensive. So I'm trying to buy a house. So and the ones that we like are a little bit expensive. So at the moment, I haven't got capital to play with, but we would buy something, throw like 400 links at it, and sell it within 6 months.
Yeah,
9 if it took a bit longer to work. It seems to me to be the because where I struggle is I'm not a monetization CRO guy, so I wouldn't be buying things that are clearly atrociously monetized. I'd be wanting to buy something that they're making money from it, but they're crap at building links or crap at growing it. And because you've just got to double the traffic, you'll double your money because it's converting well, and then you can flip it.
Yeah, you should always, in my opinion, like whatever skill set you have. So if it's link building, SEO, CRO, you should buy based off that skill set, because why not put yourself at the advantage already, like from the outset, right? So yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Vin's the only one of us that's been through the whole process. He built a site from scratch, sold it, wrote a blog post about it.
Wow. Sold it with the wrong guys.
That what was so long ago. Yeah.
I give it some shit about it all the
time. He's a patient man now. He's gone from his 1 year flipping strategy to
no, you know what, man? I see where that site is now, and I see what keywords it ranks for, and I never want to feel that feeling again. Yeah. Because I know what they have to be earning for some of those keywords.
Like, man, who are buying businesses? These guys are like, super naive and crazy. And then I talk to the buyers and like, man, these sellers have no idea what they're selling. They're so naive and crazy.
Yeah, so you get to see both sides.
Yeah.
When it comes to money, everybody's crazy.
When it's your first sale, though, and it's a substantial amount of money, I can't remember what Vin's blog post said now, like 750 or something, was it?
It was like 6, but that was also including earnings over 18 months.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, when it's your first sale, it's a substantial sum of money.
For sure.
Like that would take care of my house buying problem. Well,
not if you're in London.
Well, yeah, I was going to say it would take care of 2/3 of my house buying problem. We went to see houses this last couple of weeks, and they're like 4 of Garrett's house, but half the size. 4 times the price, half the size.
Hey, living in the middle of nowhere has its perks.
It does.
What's even more annoying about it is Garrett likes where he lives, so it's not like he's had to take some kind of punishing compromise. He lives where he wants to live in a nice house at a quarter the price. So it's like you just have to hate the guy a little bit.
Oh yeah.
I still remember I bought my house in Alaska for 250,000 is like a starter home, and then I was still working in the oil field at the time, and I looked at houses in Houston, and for like the same price, I could have bought this house that had like in-home theater, like castle turrets, like just crazy. Like, oh my god, what am I doing? It's like, why did I buy this shit mud house in Alaska? I'm such an idiot.
Do you not get a tax rebate for having property in Alaska? I thought like Alaska was like they give you free money or something.
I don't get the free money anymore because I don't live there, and I live mainly abroad. But yeah, I mean the free money is like $1,000, something like that. It's like
really
a month of your heating bill.
A little bit overhyped then.
Yeah. The Simpsons did us no favors on that one.
If you live there 100 years, you can buy one small website.
That's the goal, man. Mr. Money Mustache your way into website acquisitions.
You should do a webinar about that, how all Alaskans can buy a website if they live to 110.
I just got to avoid the polar bears and the wolves and everything else.
I'm sure there's people up there that love it, though. I mean, I couldn't.
It's beautiful,
I couldn't deal with the cold where Garrett lives, let alone Alaska. So,
where do you live, Garrett?
Minnesota.
Yeah, Minnesota is actually colder more often than the Arctic Circle where I used to work.
Well, I was looking at
it's actually worse in Minnesota.
I was looking at a weather map on the news, and it looks like the Arctic Circle has moved to over Minnesota this year.
Yeah, it's been a rough winter this
It's
year.
just in Minneapolis, yeah.
yeah, it's been cold. But
yeah, like I saw that it's going to be like -4 centigrade or something when I'm in Philadelphia in a few weeks, and I was saying to Garrett, "This is ridiculous. How am I supposed to deal with that?"
Oh,
yeah,
man,
never mind. It was like -70 degrees Fahrenheit with the wind chill a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah,
I've totally worked in that condition. I remember going out on a forklift covered in mud and getting this pallet. I put it up on this deck, and I get off the forklift, and all the mud on my coveralls has been frozen into hard ice sheets and it's just like falling off me as I'm walking inside. Like, this is ridiculous.
Oh, and then you thought, I need to get into some kind of different game than this now.
A good friend of mine's a field engineer up in North Dakota, and he's
okay. Yeah, I've worked there in North Dakota.
The outfit he's working for, he said he just had enough, and he just said he's had enough. No, I fucking quit. I'm done. I'm just sick of this. I've been doing it for 10 years, and I didn't care. And then they
had a driller. He told me. Go ahead. Yeah. Enough about my oil field life.
Just asking. So the websites that you're typically working with, are they mostly very niche, or are there a lot of general type websites? And he's just asking specifically about one niche, home services. Are there many going for good money in that space?
In home services specifically, I'm not sure exactly what niche of home services, because that's going to be a pretty broad one. But we
I guess it just means like plumbing, gutter repair, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that we would call that like, a lead gen site, right? And yeah, there's a going market for them. Typically a lead gen gets a lower multiple than say affiliate site content, because the ceiling is much lower versus a content site has a much higher ceiling of what you can earn. But you can sell them for sure. I think the best way to sell them is directory style. So if you have a directory website focused on one city, or a directory website focused on one profession across many cities, that's probably the better way, because you can show the buyer the height of that ceiling is much higher that way. But in terms of general niches, in 2017, we did see quite a few sites that just are like review anything kind of sites that like that boggles a lot of SEOs. Like, how are they doing this? You know, we would see quite a few of those sites in 2017. Not so much in 2018.
That's about 70% of our link building business is just like crossbow reviews, best crossbow. I mean, using that as a joke. Someone on the site he posted that as a joke. But it's that kind of
do some local elite plumbing, all backlinks about crossbows.
it's so they're so specific. It's like, you know, not just, you know, oh, let's review rechargeable batteries. Let's just review AA rechargeable batteries on one site and call it like best of. You know, it's a really, really specific best of sites, but with like 200 pages of content.
It's crazy
how specific people are, but people are doing really well with them. That's the interesting thing. Like there was a period where there was a lot of consolidation around authority sites that had broad. So like for PCs, you'd have like, you know, your PC World type sites, their laptop reviews would dominate. Now you've got people reviewing one specific type of laptop able to overtake them. It seems like that's an area of opportunity for people to attack.
For sure.
The rankings again. So it's kind of almost a return to the sniper sites that people used to build in the AdSense.
Like by the way, I'm totally cool with sniper sites. What I would suggest, which hurts the ability to do the sniper site, is don't make it into an EMD or even a partial EMD. Make it into an actual branded domain. So like you have a sniper site, but it is on a branded domain. And then when you go to sell it, if that's part of your goal, like if you don't care about selling it, like, you know, do whatever you want. But if selling is part of your goal, you should always keep in mind, how can I make it look like that there's still a lot more room for this to grow for that potential buyer? And EMDs don't usually lend themselves to, like, you know, oh, this best red blenders 2018 review.us has a lot of opportunity to grow in the kitchen space. You know, like it doesn't really sound like it.
I mean, Ben actually spoke about that on the show a little while ago. The strategy with one of his sites was it was gonna be a sniper site for one really narrow part of a niche, but with a name that let him just bolt on another really small part of the niche and just keep bolting things on until it became a broad site. But initially he's just building
that's a smart strategy.
But we're trying to do that with one of our new sites, following in Vin's footsteps. It's going to be really, really specific, but the name is like, we can put virtually anything in the niche on it if it works out.
That's great. I'm a big fan of authority sites, but I always tell people when you start an authority site, it's best to think of it still like a niche site, where like your silo is basically the niche site that you're working on at first, and then slowly expand from there. Or fast, depending on your capital.
Another question from Mark. If the site's very niche, can you... Oh no, I think actually what he's asking is, so I guess he's thinking like home services, like he might dominate a city where there is a big provider in that city. Like, so let's just use plumbing as the example, because that's the one I made up originally. So say you absolutely dominate plumbing in Arizona. If there's like a huge plumbing company in Arizona, would you be able to help business owners, site seller find those kind of business owners to sell to? Or are you purely selling to people in your kind of network of known buyers that are just buying, you know, because it might be worth more to the biggest plumbing group in Arizona that's super pissed off that you're giving them zero reviews, outranking them. They might be able to buy that and make way more margin on the leads than a website owner just selling the leads is going to make. Right? So, and that's actually a really good question, Mark, because one of our clients, it was a joint client. We were partners with another agency building this guy's business, but he was VC funded, raised a couple of million, built the site up with that investment and sold it to one of the businesses in the space for the multiples were about 16 times revenue, none of this 3 times nonsense, but it was one of the biggest players in the industry. So to them, the margin, he went from, all the money was made from lead gen to they were just making all the fucking profit on this bad boy. So to them, it was worth 30 times as much as. So they didn't even give him a good deal. It was 16 times because then they gave him 4 times as much. But obviously it was 64 something like that $1 million. So he wasn't too concerned with the.
That's awesome.
But that kind of deal. I can't say much more. We're out of non-disclosure now. But if I say too much more, it's obvious who he is. I've made up the numbers sufficiently far away from the real numbers. You can't just Google the numbers.
All the names have been changed, the locations changed.
Yeah. Well, the guy's gone on to have multiple successful exits afterwards because we're going back a long time as well. But because he was selling to someone in the industry that could make way more money than just a random investor.
Yeah.
So can you help those kind of deals and find those kind of people in the industry?
Yeah, so to answer their question is currently right now we don't proactively go out so in this specific case, this local niche, we wouldn't necessarily go out and reach out to those companies. In the future, we likely will. We're building out an outreach campaign to get more targeted buyers and so on. But to answer, basically tack on what you just said, if you can find a strategic buyer, the amount that person's willing to buy your business goes dramatically up. Sometimes very dramatically, like the 16x example that you gave there, because they don't necessarily care about the money that it's making. Rather, they care about what can this do for my primary business, right? How is this going to amplify my primary business to the moon and back? So that's why they're looking at that acquisition. So yeah, strategic acquisitions are very, very great.
So I lost track of my question there. I have another I'll check. Mark, has that answered your question? Have we gone into enough on depth on that? I guess at the minute, I don't think there's any brokers do that at the minute, particularly except outside niches. I mean, there's some niches where certain types of site, I'm trying to not say certain types of site go for. So there's very small brokerages that deal just in those niches and stuff. But I don't think there's a broad brokerage firm that does that at the minute, unless I'm mistaken.
No, you're pretty correct. There are like some like one-man and like buyer brokers maybe as well. And traditional brokers will sometimes do something like that, but in our space, it is not something that truly exists at the moment.
So I think that's going to be a growth opportunity because I think that will push multiples up as well. Because I think in a lot of cases, especially in the lead gen space that Mark's talking about, if he was to, instead of selling the business, buy the smallest business in town and go on a recruitment drive with the competent management team in place, he could sort of, yield 8 times the return of actually selling the site. Am I still here? I'm getting some lag. I don't know if it's at my end or.
What I was saying was, like, even if you don't want to, like, because now that saw this lead generation at a much lower multiple than say a content set, you can come in on our marketplace or source it privately, buy these lead generations from people, and then you reach out to those strategic potential buyers in that local market where they're willing to pay you like the X versus the inks on your net monthly profits. So that's also an interesting strategy you can do.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm not sure if I'm getting a lot of feedback on the call. Is it my end? Am I, or is it Garrett? Is it me?
Well, you cut out, and then coincidentally, Greg started cutting out. But
so it's just the call.
Maybe like just be Google Hangouts.
Yeah, Google Hangouts. It's just like I'm on crappy hotel Wi-Fi. He's on crappy hotel Wi-Fi. Which one of us is both?
Teamwork, man.
yeah,
Teamwork on the cutouts.
I think you're both fine now.
So yeah, I got the gist though. I think you said like you could do the reverse and buy these cheaper service businesses and then either set it up to make the higher profit or find the strategic buyer to sell it.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a friend who's like he used to work for a brokerage, well, a kind of private finance type brokerage, not one of the big players, and then he's just looking at setting up local businesses now. Like he builds the lead gen site first and doesn't really care if that like breaks even. Like it's just to test whether he can get them enough business to run a company, and then is looking at setting up companies. It's just kind of
that's interesting. That's like the what is it? Product market fit that like SaaS entrepreneurs talk about all the time. It's kind of like the brick and mortar version of that. I like that.
Yeah, he's doing all like plumbers and stuff like that. It's kind of interesting some of the stuff people are up to. I mean, we kind of just we're taking because we basically didn't build anything until the last, I don't know, how long have we even been serious with stuff, Garrett? Like 6 months?
Yeah, pretty much 2018. We wasted all our time making other people rich and being a lot less rich.
finding out one of our clients has a £1 billion, so $1.6 billion company now.
Wow.
Was the final straw that broke the camel's back on this we should just be a service company forever thing. We're like, oh, wait a minute, this is
doing like all the real hard work here. And
well, no, I mean, to be fair to him, he's a really smart guy and he spotted a niche and he monetizes the site like a genius and stuff like that, you know.
right.
You know, but I would settle for being 10% as good as him as having 100. So I'll take the fact that I'm not as good as him if I can get to 10%. So
well, I'll just go cash out the equity out of my house and
yeah.
Just come over to our marketplace with that cash out equity, man. I'll help you out.
A couple of options you can afford with your equity, Garrett. But yeah, we're just dipping our toe into everything. So like every idea that you've mentioned, that we've mentioned, that other people are trying, we've kind of dipped our toe into a whole bunch, and something will float to the top and get our excitement going, and that'll be the one that we go like 400 times all in on. So we've got lead gen, local, niche, authority broad. You know, we've got everything in the portfolio at the minute that we're dipping our toe into to see which one we get most excited about over the next few years. So
that's great. My personal favorite is authority sites, but also because I'm like I'm lazy to deal with like SEO clients. Like I couldn't handle anymore like a dentist or a plumber telling me like, you know, why don't you just turn on Google? Like, what do you mean? Like, just turn it on, make me number one.
Greg, you hit the nail on the head, literally. That is why I do not do local SEO.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a great way to start. It's a great way to bankroll your education once you get going. Like, I think authority sites are awesome.
It's super easy if you're competent in SEO. Like, you take a few local clients on, you will make them a lot of money. One of our first, the funny thing is though, they're not really ready for the growth because they've been screwed over so many times. They just have a go and nothing's going to happen. And one of our first clients, when Garrett had finished university and we were starting the business, we picked up a local client in the local space, and he had a semi breakdown, shut the business for a month, and went to Hawaii for a month.
Oh wow!
Afterwards, well, I thought you guys were just going to screw me over. I was going to maybe get 10% more money or whatever. And then like the phone's just ringing all the fucking time. He goes, I've got a voicemail. I've got like an hour of taped voicemails. I can't listen to all of these. So, well, we told you we were going to triple your business. You were supposed to hire a girl to answer the phone. Like, what are you doing?
Oh, that's awesome.
He thought we were full of shit and stuff. But,
And why wouldn't you, right? There's so many of those people that are, right?
Yeah. I mean,
sure.
We were lucky. I mean, we went into consulting after, Garrett had been freelancing the whole time he was in college. We were working together on projects in like Viagra, online gambling.
All the wholesome niches.
Yeah, all the different niches. So we kind of cut our teeth in a little bit harder niches than local.
Yeah,
so we were like, this is fucking easy. Just
I have friends that they want to make money online, and whenever they start a blog, it's like always a blog about making money online. I was like, guys, this is actually a pretty hard niche. It's way easier for you to talk about beekeeping or something like really boring. Get away from this.
Yeah, make money online is a little bit oversaturated with. The problem is, I think, to be successful in that space, and someone asked earlier that we have to talk more about Russell Brunson at some point during the podcast. So I guess this is a good opportunity.
I heard about this controversy.
Well, I'm not going to get into the controversy. Just in general terms, those guys have an element of storytelling and charisma that might not resonate with you. Like, they don't really resonate with me. The thing I enjoy about Russell Brunson is his brutal honesty with what he's going to do to you. Like, he's literally written 2 books where he outlines in detail how to run the game that he's running, how to get the money out of the mark, how you don't have to know anything to take the money off the mark. His books are fantastic at telling you exactly what he's going to do to you. And then he does it to his followers who've read his book because he gave it to them for free. That's how he got them on his list in the first place. They've read his goddamn book and they still fall for it. He obviously has a charisma that resonates with those people. And if you don't have that in you, and if you feel sick at the idea of ripping someone off and telling them to their face that you're going to rip them off, I'm not saying he necessarily rips people off. I don't want to be targeting him. But if you haven't got that in you, you're not going to be able to break the make money online niche, because the people who are doing it have that.
Yeah, I mainly agree with that.
Someone's trying to decide where to dick off their $1,000. They're going to pick
Viagra.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
It's a much more honest niche.
Well, we worked for one of the legal pharmacies, so we were up against the bad guys selling their arsenic laced tablets from God knows where and stuff like that. Our client actually sent a bunch of pills to be tested. They bought like crap loads of stuff from these other ones and sent them all to some lab. And some of the stuff people were taking, and they were thinking it was Viagra, and it was a mix of poison and aspirin and things like that. It's like,
interesting.
It just shows how much of the placebo effect works. Someone was repeatedly ordering poison and aspirin. That was
sexy time, like poison.
That was firing the cannon, no problems every time. I mean, that just shows the placebo effect right there.
It's amazing that you put anything in there. Like, if I was selling like placebo or like fake Viagra, like I wouldn't go through the trouble of getting poison or aspirin to put in. Oh, I guess aspirin would be easy. You just buy it from Walmart or something. But
yeah, maybe the hell knows, man. I mean, I don't think the sites that sell that know what they're selling. They're just dodgy.
They probably don't. Yeah,
have some source abroad, and no one knows what it is. It might be Viagra. It might be aspirin with God knows what else. And the poison, of course, wasn't necessarily put in there on purpose. I mean, if you make things,
that's true. It's very easy to make accidental poison, I guess, when you're making fake Viagra pills.
Yeah, well, I watched that documentary about crocodile or whatever it was with Louis Theroux when he went over to Russia and watched them making it and stuff. And obviously they haven't got the right equipment. They can't use the right temperatures. So what they're making actually rots them from the inside out because of all the impurities and poisons. But they're also addicted. They keep taking it. But what I mean is just making things is pretty hard if you're supposed to be a chemist and know what you're doing. So I imagine I don't imagine they went out of their way to make the poison. I think it probably just ended up in there somehow during the awesome production line that they had.
It's the byproduct of the quest of knowledge, right?
Yeah, really. So don't get into that space. I think someone said earlier, actually, I forget who,
Moral of
about
the story.
when you're picking your niches, like don't pick things that are illegal, that are heavily regulated, if you're going to not know what the fuck you're doing and be able to source good product and stay within the law. There's so many niches where it doesn't matter. Like if you're selling, let's just take something stupid like your cookbook. If you can sell it and the people that buy it think the recipes taste good, it doesn't matter if it makes them fat. But you sell people aspirin laced with poison by mistake, is kind of gonna get you thrown in jail if you're ever caught.
Yeah.
So you just have to be sensible.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of being in niches where, like, I don't like, maybe the shovel I recommended wasn't the best shovel and it broke when you're digging your garden. I'd much rather be that guy than the guy selling like this crazy Forex opportunity or, whatever that potentially ruins someone forever, their 401k or their life, their health, relationships, all that kind of stuff. So just seeking those high payouts, I don't think is always the best option.
Are you railing against gambling on the futures market?
Whoa, no, that's totally legit. I calm down there. What are you talking about?
Oh man, yeah. I'm a bit of a degenerate. That's why I was chuckling at your fundraising options. I was like, these all sound like things I would totally do.
Would totally.
Well, I would have done when I was younger. I'm past it now, but yeah, some of my investment strategies included, credit card day trading and just whatever.
Oh man,
whatever it took to leverage up that gamble. Why lose the 10 grand you've got when you can throw an extra 10 in to double your winnings, eh?
It's funny. I'm actually like, I speak about leverage all the time, but I'm actually not a huge fan of leverage. If you like, I think if you can avoid it, the better. And the reason why I say that is like, while if you leverage, you can always make more money. And while that's usually the goal of all of us in business, I think it's important to also think of like when is enough, because I've seen a lot of investors overextend themselves for that next big project, the next coin, or that they want to earn, and all that kind of stuff. And that next project goes terrible. And really, like, was your life that much different because you were making 15K and now you might be making 25K a month, but now you're making nothing because you over leverage yourself so much? So I don't know. I think it's a fine balancing act.
Well, I used to be a bank manager, so I saw deals where people who'd been like in the property investment space, which you kind of alluded to, that's kind of a similar flip and build game. You build it, make the improvements, flip it quickly. It's the kind of what a lot of website investors are looking to do. And they would do 20, 30 amazingly successful projects. And the next thing you know, they're building 87 houses. And it's a fucking disaster. And they end up bankrupt at minus $500,000. And everything they had before is lost. I mean, because over here, especially in some states over there, your primary residence is protected. Good luck with that over here. Your house is gone. If you're over a certain age, your pension's gone. If you're under a certain age, your pension's safe. But over a certain age, they'll take your pension as well.
Damn. And that's I have friends just like that, man. They bought tons of real estate investment properties, and then I see their blueprints on their dinner table for this 20-plex they're going to develop on a piece of land, and it just goes completely to shit. They lose it all, and there's some my older friends, and they were going to retire. Like, this was the retirement, and now they're going to be working well into their 80s probably.
I mean, I was actually watching a really interesting documentary about the Australian housing market, because it's kind of a precursor to what's starting to happen around some parts of America, and maybe would happen over here if Brexit doesn't go well. They're kind of 5 years ahead of us on things going to shit in this economy of debt. And loads of people had bought investment properties. They had interest-only mortgages on them. So they were making, like their interest was 300, they were renting it for 700, and they were going to retire. The banks have written to them saying, we're switching all of these to repayment mortgages, but because of your age, we're going to make you repay over 10 years. So suddenly, and at the same time, the housing market's collapsing in Australia, so the rents have gone down so their mortgage payment's gone from 300 to 1,200, and their rent's gone from 700 to 600. So then they're having to liquidate those properties quickly. Of course, all the banks doing that means loads of people are liquidating properties quickly, which is pushing the market down even more. A kind of spiral of doom situation. I think that's where leverage puts you at the most risk. Like if you have 100K and you invest that in a site and the market crashes and you can only sell it for 60K, the worst situation you can be in is that you end up with zero, but that's never going to happen if you have a profitable asset. So you end up with some amount less than you bought. If you're leveraged, you can go from, making a small profit. It's kind of like picking up the stockbroker saying for it is picking up quarters from in front of the steamroller. It's the steamroller. It's all good while you're making that money on the bank, but when the steamroller catches you, game over.
I think it's crazy with the mortgage stuff. People buy these houses and they're like, "Oh, it's mine," but like it's not yours. It's the bank's technically. They can call on that mortgage. A lot of the times, they can call on the mortgage anytime they want. Like it's like written in a lot of their rules, which is I only recently found that out, which I find extremely scary.
Yeah, it is terrifying. I mean, we're a little bit more protected over here. They have to find a reasonable settlement with you, and you can make really stupid offers in court, and then the judge will postpone it 6 months, and it's really hard to get you out of your house if you're making any vague effort to pay over here. But the banks have the contracts written, so they have the maximum chance of getting their way.
Right. Yeah. Same over here. I think there's some states that protect it. By over here, I actually mean USA, not here in Vietnam. I have no idea what Vietnam does with this.
Who the hell knows over there? Getting into legal systems in countries that you haven't lived in for at least 5 years to get a feel for it. It's too difficult.
Yeah, man. Like I've actually looked at investing in real estate in Saigon because I've been living in Ho Chi Minh City for over 2 years, but I think it's just such a crazy housing bubble over here. Like I'd much rather buy a place where I could buy free and clear, Birmingham, Alabama, or something like that. As much as I would like to have a free place out here, but
stick to my 5-year rule, man. If in 3 years you're still interested, then look at it. 5-year rule, man. It's the way to go on investing in stuff in places you're not 100% local to.
Yeah, I agree with that. You're
same with industries. Like I feel like if you're going to start buying online assets, you should probably have 5 years experience in the online marketing world, at least somewhat.
I somewhat agree with that one, and the reason why is just because the internet industry changes so dramatically, so quickly. I think you're on the right track though with that. I don't think if you have zero experience in online business or SEO or paid traffic or something, then you probably shouldn't buy an online business. Like I've seen that worked out before, where a guy like, he actually tried to build a few affiliate sites and failed constantly, and then he bought one and it was a huge success. But I would say that's probably the exception to the rule.
I would say he has the experience in the bank. He just hasn't.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I'm more thinking of like someone who's a good property developer, thinking, "Oh, there's some good ROI here. The business model's the same." If I bought an advertising supported business, like how quickly Facebook changes. It's like you're talking about online marketing in general. Facebook ads change brutally. Like what works 1 minute, the prices are always creeping up. I could buy, a business that's doing 30% ROI, and if my creative ideas aren't as good as the previous guy, we could immediately be making losses, and then it's going to get worse by 13% a year until.
For sure.
You have to have the. I mean, maybe I have got enough years in the bank with just some of the advertising I've done, but I wouldn't feel confident even with some experience buying an ad-supported site, because unless it came with, like like if it was a business and there was a head of advertising,
the infrastructure was there, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
If it was an owner-driven business where the advertising was driven by the creative of the owner.
Yeah, it could be a scary prospect, but I mean, it's similar to like Google algorithm updates. They can change, not nearly as frequently as Facebook ads. But one thing I usually suggest to people that they're looking at doing something like that is to really utilize agencies. So, for example, at EF, we use search scientists. Like, I know quite a bit about Facebook ads, but they know a lot more about Facebook ads than me, and I just manage that out. It's again that system thing, if I wanted, like, I'm a big content creator, I love creating content, but I don't want to be writing 1,000 articles about, the blenders. I'm going to hire Vincent's writers for that to do that for me, right? And they'll do it just as well or good enough for me. And so I think there are ways to mitigate that by utilizing good, trusted agencies as a way to start off. Not always, though. I mean, you could still buy that business and be shut out of luck, right? It could happen for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense, I guess. I guess as long as you factor in the cost of the agency, because obviously the existing owner doesn't have that because of his or her existing creative genius. I guess it's
well, a lot of them, they just don't want to let go, right? They don't want to let go of what they're doing in the business. They want to control everything. And that's part of the reason why they often reach the cap and what they can do.
Apparently, we haven't had a donation in the last 2 hours, Garrett.
Oh man, this has been a failure of a presentation.
Yeah, I mean, come on, guys. We've taught you how to get grandma to buy you your first web property. Let's have some donations. We've talked about Viagra. I haven't told you any sad stories since the beginning. Come on, let's make a little donation. All the way from the Far East, we're getting this presentation on a man who's did a presentation, passed out in bed, got back up to present again. Let's have a couple of little donations, even just a few $5. Let's move the total on a little bit. Let's help St. Jude's out. They need the money more than we do. I mean, speak to your grandma. Instead of getting 100,000 for your first site, get $5 for St. Jude's Children's Cancer Research.
Well, let's look at the $100,000 for St. Jude's.
Oh yeah. Talk to
again. Get your site at 100K.
Yeah. Talk to her about that tomorrow. Get the $5 today.
I got this great investment opportunity with no ROI.
I've got this great investment opportunity, $100,000 for St. Jude's. Well, I mean, it is a huge.
It is. Yeah.
I mean, every child that survives is worth infinity dollars. So
yeah, I love the stuff that they've been doing. I believe they just recently had some kind of breakthrough on like their cancer research. Not too long. I think it was St. Jude's. I read too many of the Science Alert articles.
Yeah, they've had a lot of breakthroughs. I mean, there's one of the stories we covered earlier on the show was a young lad, I think it was, of 3 or something, survived a previously untreatable form of cancer that the other hospitals weren't able to treat, and he's in remission. So Godspeed, and may that last the rest of his life.
Yeah, for sure. So, that's great.
They have breakthroughs all the time, some major, some minor, but everyone life-changing. So
yeah, if
you guys can help us out a little bit, if you've enjoyed our banter and hopefully Greg and I haven't gone too far off the banter, but it is 4 a.m. for me, and we did have an audience interaction segment planned, so Greg could overrun as much as he wanted because Jared isn't due on for another 20 minutes, so we had plenty of time. None of you have volunteered to come on the show, so pay a small donation to St. Jude's as your penance for not coming on and chatting to us.
It's the indulgence payment for indulgences.
Yeah. Either that or please volunteer for one of the other audience interaction segments that you guys were all calling for. Although I know not literally the same people, because I'm sure the audience is totally different people.
I'm sure you have someone that's just been up this entire time with you guys. How
We
long
do.
have you guys been up now?
Well, I've been up since 8 o'clock this morning, and it's 4 a.m. now for me. So however long that is.
Is it did this start at 8 a.m. for you? The 24 hours?
No, it started at 3 p.m. for me, so I have
3
another
p.m.
11 hours or something.
Yeah, we got 11 more hours.
Yeah.
Nice. Very cool.
I had planned to sleep in, but there was building work at 8 a.m. outside my hotel. They're building a big apartment block, so I was woken up at 8 and couldn't go back to sleep. So
there's this place I used to live in Saigon called Japantown. There's like a series of alleyways, and I'd be talking to my boss on Zoom or whatever, and suddenly you just hear this jackhammer just going crazy up above me. He's like, "What is it with your apartments, man? It always sounds like there's an airplane flying through." I got so used to it when I moved out of that area to a really, really nice high rise in Saigon. I was like, God, it's so quiet.
Yeah.
I feel weird. Like I have anxiety how quiet it is.
Yeah. What's missing in my life?
I need that jackhammer back.
Oh, shit.
Oh, man.
Well,
I guess there's no more questions in the chat. So if you want to make an escape, you can. If you want to stay and hang out with us until Jared comes in 15 minutes.
I do have to restart this thing. We can do that quick.
Well, it was a pleasure hanging out with you guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
and
thank you for coming on.
hopefully, you guys are going to be sending out a recording for this as well for us.
Oh yeah, there's going to be a recording. I mean,
okay, cool.
Jared's going to hop on after the restart, so we're good. So that's good news. But yeah, awesome. No, there'll be a recording. We had last year we weren't organized enough with what we were going to do with the recordings. This time we're going to get them to you guys as the speakers a bit sooner, so you can give them a push, ask for some donations from your email list.
Okay, good. That's what I wanted to end on. Yeah. We're super happy to share this with our audience. So please just shoot us the link, and hopefully we can get more donations to you guys. So
yeah, and I think it'll be good this year getting the recordings out nice and quick and get it to people's audiences, because I think that's where, you know, last year we had most of the viewers live, like over 1,800 people watched live, and probably, you know, if you add up all the people that have been coming in and out, it's going to be similar this year. But you know, people have got mailing lists of like 10,000 and stuff like that. You know, we're going to be able to get a lot more viewers who want just that one specific speaker after the event, and so hopefully this year that'll work out, and we'll get a really nice final push of donations in a week or two when those go out.
Great. I think this is awesome, by the way. So look forward to its success, and I'll see you guys in a little bit. I'm going to go get some of this Vietnamese coffee. If you guys never had Vietnamese coffee, definitely give it a shot. It's like the best.
I guess I've only had it in America, but
it'll give you a heart attack, but it's amazing. It's worth every heart attack.
I think I'm gonna have to have some more of this Nespresso, which is all I've got in the hotel room, but it'll have to do for now.
All right, guys. I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much. Bye.
See you, man. Thanks for joining.
Okay, we will be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Yeah, please don't go anywhere this time. Last time everyone left and it took us like half an hour to build back up. Jared is on talking about site speed right after this short break.
Yep, be right back.